Chapter 81. Hue Resentment, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 81. Hue Resentment, Part 2, Wei Shilai frowned and said, I've already reported this matter to the imperial court and didn't hide anything. It was obvious that Su Yenyu did not look at the report carefully. Now that something had happened, he wanted to pin the blame on Wei Shilai. Su Yenyu's eyes turned cold. If you didn't hide anything, why would the situation become like this? Why is the resentment so strong? Wei Shilai replied calmly. The ones who killed them are their biological parents. They are indignant and can't seek justice. How can they rest in peace? Wei Shilai looked at Kongyu and Kongling. The more the masters try to eliminate them, the stronger the resentment will be. Kongyu frowned and opened his mouth, but in the end, he remained silent. When they first entered the village, it wasn't like this. Even if Su Yenyu was fooling around, there was nothing dangerous. However, it was only after they attacked the vengeful souls that something unusual happened. Kongyu looked at the crowd and found a few familiar faces. Those were the ones the masters had eliminated, but they didn't disappear. Instead, they came back stronger. Looking at Kongyu and Kongling who had a shocked look on their faces, Su Yenyu knew that they couldn't handle this situation. He was instantly furious. Then what should we do? Are we going to get trapped here forever? I didn't pay for you to come and do nothing. Su Yenyu lost his temper. He was a lord, and his status was noble. Kongyu and Kongli frowned, not daring to talk back. Su Changde said with a fawning smile, My lord, drink some tea to calm down. Su Yenyu kicked him. Get lost. What a useless bunch. What's the use of having you? Su Yenyu looked like he was angry at his servant, but everyone knew who he was referring to. Kongyu's face was dark. Kongling wanted to say something but hesitated. He could only choke down the anger in his heart. After a while, Kongyu said, I will find a way to seek help from the sect. As long as we find the source of this increasing resentment, we can tackle it. Kongyu and Kongling were psychics after all, so Su Yenyu did not dare to offend them too much. He said, then find the source. Kongyu nodded. Lord Su, please wait here. Kongling and I are going to set up the formation. Wei Shilai retreated to the side in silence. When he looked up, he could only see the dark sky, as if it was covered by a layer of ink. He hoped that the sky would light up soon. He did not know if Lu Sanyang could handle such a troublesome situation. If not, he hoped that Lu Sanyang would not interfere. It took almost 2 hours for Kongyu and Kongling to set up the formation. Then a talisman floated up into the sky, heading in one direction, and Kong Kong and Kongling immediately followed it. Su Yenyu did not feel safe if the masters weren't around, so he followed them. There were still many villagers shouting for help. They had scratched their necks until they were bleeding, but they could not get their daughter off. The women cried softly. Let your father go. That's your father. Facing their own daughters, they were terrified and angry at the same time. Why did they come back to haunt their parents after they died? No matter what they did or how they begged for mercy, they couldn't get their daughter to let them off. Kongyu and Kongling arrived outside a house. They kicked open the door and found that there was no one inside. Su Changde shouted at the top of his lungs, Whose house is this? Come out quickly. This is Lu Laoda's house. It's Lu Laoda who brought this disaster on us. He had 7 daughters who he claimed to have died of illnesses. Everyone knows it's not true. Masters, the source definitely comes from Lu Laoda's house. Su Yenyu looked at Wei Shilai angrily. Magistrate Wei, aren't you going to explain? Wei Shilai said calmly, this family indeed had 7 daughters. Lu Laoda died abnormally. He was killed by his 7 dead daughters. Kongyu frowned. But why are the 7 vengeful souls nowhere to be seen? Wei Shilai said, someone exorcise them. Tian Lan immediately said, that's impossible. It's impossible for a vengeful soul to be exorcised. Do you know how much power it takes to exorcise a vengeful soul? Besides, exorcising vengeful souls requires one to chant scriptures for 7 days. The greater the vengeance, the less likely it is to be exorcised. It was obvious that the 7 daughters had all been killed by their biological father. They were so vengeful that they came back to kill him. How could such vengeful souls be exorcised? Wei Shilai looked at Kongyu. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean others can't. Kongling couldn't help but ask. Who is that person? Since he can exorcise the souls of this family, why doesn't he exorcise all of them? Wei Shilai frowned. It's a girl. She'll be here at dawn. You might get to see her. Su Yenyu cursed under his breath and did not speak. He did not expect things to turn out like this. If he knew that this matter was so intractable, he would not have come here. Su Yenyu looked at Kongyu and Kongling incredulously. Were these two really very capable? Kongyu and Kongling were extremely famous in the capital and were often invited by respectful officials. This was the first time Su Yenyu hired them, so he was still doubtful of their ability. Kongyu and Kongling both had embarrassed looks on their faces. This situation was really beyond their ability to handle. Kongyu looked at Wei Shilai and said calmly, if what Magistrate Wei said is true, then we just have to wait. There's always someone better than us out there. We have to admit that our ability is not enough to tackle this situation. Kongling wanted to say something but thought better of it. However, he did not believe that someone could exorcise so many vengeful souls at once. The two of them planned to just wait and see. It wasn't that they were swindlers, but that this situation was too serious. Su Yenyu suspected their ability because he didn't know how serious the situation was. Lu Sanyang was woken up by someone knocking on the door. Before she could get out of her bed, Lu Erlang had already opened the door, shouting. What an annoying prick! Who is knocking on the door in the middle of the night? Chapter 82. Miss Lu is here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 82. Miss Lu is here. As soon as the door opened, the constable who came to invite Lu Sanyang entered the courtyard. Lu Erlang pushed him but couldn't stop him from entering. He spoke up anxiously. Miss Lu, something bad has happened. Go and take a look. When Lu Erlang heard that it had something to do with his sister, he immediately sobered up. Whatever has happened, talk about it in the morning. How could a young girl leave her house in the middle of the night? The constable was so anxious that his eyes turned red. Something really happened. River Village is covered in fog. The people from the capital and Magistrate Wei are all trapped inside. Lu Erlang frowned. Was it really so serious? Lu Sanyang had already put on her clothes and came out. I'll go with you. Lu Erlang immediately grabbed Lu Sanyang. No, it's already so late. Mr. Lu and Madam Wei also came out. They didn't want Lu Sanyang to go over. They opened their mouths but couldn't say anything to stop her. Lu Sanyang patted Lu Erlang's hand. Second brother, don't worry. I'll be fine. Lu Sanyang turned around and followed the constable out. Madam Wei strode to the door and watched Lu Sanyang get into the carriage. Her heart tightened. Sanyang, be careful. Lu Sanyang replied. Yes. There was no time to waste. The constable had already driven the carriage away. Although the carriage traveled fast, it was already dawn when they arrived at River Village. Officer Zhou did not sleep. From time to time, he would reach out to touch the fog to see if he could feel the bridge, but he could not. When he saw the carriage, he immediately got up and ran forward. When Lu Sanyang came down, he immediately said, Miss Lu, you're finally here. Not knowing what was going on inside, they were on tenterhooks. If something happened to Su Yenyu, everyone would be in trouble. Lu Sanyang looked at the fog and frowned. Someone tried to hurt them. Officer Zhou didn't know what Lu Sanyang meant. When he saw her frown, his heart tightened. Miss Lu, is there any way? Lu Sanyang looked at the fog. I won't know until I go in. Officer Zhou was a little worried. Miss Lu, the bridge is gone. If they wanted to enter the village, they would have to cross the bridge. Without the bridge, how could they enter? Although River Village was called River Village, the river was not small and the water was deep. Lu Sanyang looked at Officer Zhou. If we don't come out in 7 days, seal this village and build a temple at the entrance. Officer Zhou was shocked. Miss Lu, this, Officer Zhou did not agree immediately. He was shocked by how serious the situation was. Lu Sanyang smiled and walked in. When Officer Zhou came back to his senses, she was already gone. Officer Zhou chased after her and shouted. Miss Lu, Lu Sanyang had already walked into the fog and disappeared. Officer Zhou looked at the fog and couldn't help but clench his fists. However, he couldn't go in. The constables present there had heard what Lu Sanyang said. They frowned and looked at the fog in front of them in awe. There were still many things in this world that they didn't know about. Lu Sanyang walked into the village and heard some cries from afar. That night, Kongyu and Kongling tried their best to walk out of the village again and again. However, no matter how they walked, they would circle around and return to the village. Su Yenyu was afraid. He didn't want to die yet. The servants behind him were no longer in a mood to please him. Kongyu, there's a figure over there. Kongling was already very tired. He rubbed his eyes and confirmed again before speaking. Kongyu looked ahead and really saw a figure. Su Yenyu was so frightened that he retreated to the back. Even though the hundreds of soldiers he brought were surrounding him, he still felt unsafe. A human or a ghost? Kongyu said nothing. It's Miss Lu. Lin Zheng lowered his voice and said to Wei Shilai. Who is Miss Lu? Who is she? Su Yenyu looked at Wei Shilai and Lin Zheng. Although Lin Zheng had lowered his voice was still audible as the surrounding was dead quiet. Wei Shilai replied. It's the girl I was talking about. She's the one who exorcised the 7 daughters in Lu Laoda's family. When Lu Sanyang walked out of the fog, Wei Shilai had already gone up to her and smiled. Miss Lu, is that you? Lu Sanyang smiled at Wei Shilai. Yes. Wei Shilai heaved a sigh of relief. Once Lu Sanyang arrived, he felt inexplicably at ease. Both Kongyu and Kongling were sizing up Lu Sanyang and frowning. How could a little girl who had no spiritual power be able to exorcise a vengeful soul? Su Yenyu's eyes lit up. He said to Lu Sanyang, are you the master magistrate Wei mentioned? Why don't you look like one? Forget it, forget it. Hurry up and tackle these souls. I'll reward you handsomely. Lu Sanyang glanced at Su Yenyu and looked away. She asked Kongyu and Kongling. What did you do? Kongyu frowned and explained. We are both psychics from the mystic sect. Of course we did what was right. Do you believe that what you did was really right? Lu Sanyang walked towards the crowd and waved her hand. The vengeful souls who were riding on their father's neck and had refused to come down jumped down, ran towards Lu Sanyang. When they reached her, they started crying. They were all 4 or 5 years old, and some of them were even younger. They cried and felt extremely aggrieved. Sis, it hurts. Some of them extended their hands and some showed their feet. They wanted Lu Sanyang to see that they were injured and in pain. Looking at this scene, people who were guilty screamed in fear. Ah, ghosts, ghosts, Kongyu frowned and his eyes widened. He could not believe what he was seeing. Lu Sanyang touched their heads as she chanted scriptures softly. Slowly, the injured vengeful souls recovered. Chapter 83. Coming of Judgment, Part 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 83. Coming of Judgment, Part 1, after Lu Sanyang stopped, the girls around her smiled. Thank you, sis. After thanking her, they turned to look at their parents and skipped towards them. The parents, who were already helpless, screamed, "Quick, exorcise them. They're all ghosts. They're not human." Faced with their daughter running towards them with a smile, they were all shocked. One after another, they started running away. However, it was useless. No matter how fast they ran, their daughter still caught up with them and jumped on their backs. They rode on their necks and hugged them tightly. Su Yenyu was shocked and immediately instructed Lu Sanyang. I order you to exorcise these ghosts. Don't let them harm the villagers." Kongyu looked at Lu Sanyang and said in a low voice, "Miss, why are you letting these vengeful souls harm humans?" Kongling gritted his teeth. "You can't do that. These vengeful souls are vicious. You can't help them. Hurry up and exorcise them." Lu Sanyang looked at Su Yenyu. "Does Lord Su know why they're vengeful?" Su Yenyu was not interested. "I don't care why. Just exorcise them." Lu Sanyang asked again. "Then how does Lord Su plan to convict these villagers?" Wei Shilai admired Lu Sanyang's courage. He added. "These people are all guilty. They killed their daughters." Su Yenyu frowned. "Magistrate Wei, are you saying that they killed their daughters with their own hands? Do you have evidence?" Before Wei Shilai could speak, a villager shouted. "My daughter died of illness. No one killed her." "Yes, mine died of illness too." Su Yenyu looked at Lu Sanyang. "Did you hear that? You need evidence to convict someone. How can you say something without evidence?" Wei Shilai was furious when the villagers were still defending themselves. Lu Sanyang felt a little sad. Kongyu said coldly, "There's no evidence of them killing their daughters, but there's evidence of you abusing your psychic power to harm people. If you're sensible, you should exorcise these vengeful souls to make up for your mistake." The villagers agreed with what he said. They looked at Lu Sanyang indignantly. "Hurry up and get rid of these evil things." A woman even came forward to grab Lu Sanyang. "You little tch, are you wanting all of us dead?" She raised her fists but was grabbed by Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang's spiritual sense was extremely powerful and easily broke through the woman's defense. The woman immediately went weak and a terrified look appeared on her face. When someone wanted to step forward to help the woman, Wei Shilai shouted. "Back off." Wei Shilai's shout shocked the villagers who wanted to go forward to hit Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang said slowly, "You married here when you were 17 years old. You had a rough childhood because you were a woman and your parents didn't love you. You thought that your son was the most important, but the first child you gave birth to was a daughter. You felt sorry, so after giving birth, you worked hard to atone please your husband. The third time you were pregnant, you finally gave birth to a son. You were overjoyed. You protected him like your own eyes. You despised your eldest daughter for being lazy and eating too much. When she was sick, you didn't allow her to rest. When your son coughed, you even blamed her for being a jinx and told her to get lost. Do you know that she would also get sad and her heart would hurt to be treated like that by her mother? She ran out and fell into the water and drowned. When you knew that she was dead, you didn't shed a single tear. You didn't care at all. It's the same for all of you. That small river has become a place where you throw all the dead bodies." Lu Sanyang calmly let go. The woman was already limp. She was afraid because Lu Sanyang knew everything about her. The feeling of being completely transparent to someone was terrifying. "None of you felt guilty for what you have done. Do you really think there's no evidence?" Lu Sanyang glanced at everyone indifferently. Someone glared at Lu Sanyang angrily and retorted. That's my business what I want to do with my daughter. It's none of your business. What evidence is there? Who can testify? A woman mustered her courage and hit the daughter on her husband's neck. I gave birth to you and you came back to torture us. I shouldn't have given birth to you in the first place. You're a jinx. They were unable to fight back because of their blood ties. They were dragged down by their mother. When the woman saw this, she was emboldened. It turned out that vengeful souls were not invincible. The woman then started to vent all her anger on her daughter. She hit her daughter while cursing. You're already dead. Why did you come back to torture us? Go to hell. The punches were thrown at a small girl. Bang! Blood spurted from the gaping hole in her head. The men were emboldened too when they found that the vengeful souls that looked terrifying were actually very weak and couldn't fight back. In an instant, blood and flesh splashed everywhere. Everyone seemed to have gone crazy as they vented their anger. Only the children who were really alive were crying in fear. Wei Shilai was stunned. He came back to his senses and looked at Lu Sanyang. He asked in a daze. Miss Lu, what should we do? These girls had already died once, but now, they were punched to death again. Su Yenyu was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Damn it, these lunatics, exorcise these things. I want to go out. Kongyu said, they were born from their mother, so they naturally can't hurt their mother. They can't even fight back. If they die like this, their souls will dissipate and they will really disappear from the world. If the vengeful soul died again, it would evaporate from the world. The men and women with murderous look on their faces didn't expect that they didn't have to be afraid at all. Chapter 84. Coming of Judgment, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 84. Coming of Judgment, Part 2, as long as people were no longer afraid of the vengeful souls and killed them again, they would truly disappear from this world. Lu Sanyang said nothing. She looked up at the sky. According to the time, it should be dawn now, but it was still dark, as if something had covered the sky above River Village. When Su Yenyu heard Kongling's explanation, he found it a little amusing. He smiled and said, you mean that these vengeful souls will completely disappear after they are killed again? Kongling nodded. Yes. Su Yenyu kicked Su Changda who was beside him. Squat down. I want to sit and watch. After knowing that there was no danger, he became interested and watched the scene with a smile. The servants immediately went to get some snacks for Su Yenyu to eat while watching. Although everyone thought that it was inappropriate to watch the show, none of them dared to say anything. Wei Shilai had never seen such a scene in his life. He could not quite describe how he felt. Blood was splattered everywhere. The men and women in River Village seemed to have gone crazy. They cursed and beat the children who couldn't resist, to death again. Wei Shilai closed his eyes. He could not bear to watch it. Lin Zheng was the same. He was furious. Clenching his fists, he said to Lu Sanyang in a low voice, Miss Lu, please do something. Lin Zheng did not understand why they hated their own daughters so much. They had already killed them once, why would they kill them again? Lu Sanyang sighed. Wrong, they're all wrong. Their resentment is increasing. Lin Zheng opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. Lu Sanyang said slowly, I won't do anything. These children are already too miserable. Lu Sanyang's words attracted the attention of Kongyu. He looked at Lu Sanyang. What do you mean by that we're wrong? The resentment is about to dissipate. How is it becoming stronger? Lu Sanyang looked at Kongyu. It was wrong to kill them the first time. It was wrong not to feel guilty when they returned. It was also wrong to kill them the second time. Kongyu frowned and smiled disdainfully. Miss Lu, you probably don't understand the situation. Look at these villagers. They've overcome their fear. Look at those vengeful souls. It's not that they can't fight back, but they're suppressed to the point that they don't dare to fight back. If they're killed this time, they'll disappear forever. Lu Sanyang said nothing. Kongling was a little displeased, but he did not want to argue with Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang walked to Wei Shilai and said, "Sir, it's going to rain. Let's go in first." Wei Shilai looked up at the gray sky. He could not tell if it would rain, but he believed Lu Sanyang and followed her into the house. Lin Jing frowned and entered the house. Outside, there were countless curses. These little girls were their daughters, but now, they wished they could eat their flesh and drink their blood. Su Yenyu clicked his tongue. That man is really ruthless. With a slap, he broke his daughter's hand into several pieces. Su Yenyu was just watching the show. The fog outside seemed to have thinned a lot, and the cursing had gradually subsided. At this moment, it rained. The rain quickly turned into a downpour. The people who were originally in a rage seemed to have vented all their anger. They stood up and went home cursing. Even from afar, one could still hear their curses. It turned out that these vengeful souls were defenseless. They wouldn't fight back even if they were beaten to death. Previously, the villagers didn't know about it and were almost scared to death. Now, they weren't afraid anymore. After personally killing the vengeful souls, they were all very excited. Su Yenyu, who had watched enough, was extremely disdainful of the sleazy environment. When the rain stops, we'll go out and get these lunatics up to join the army. The servant nodded and praised him. Lord Su, that's a wise idea. On the other side, Wei Shilai looked at the rain that was gradually stopping outside with a heavy expression. I must report to the emperor to punish these guilty people. Lu Sanyang looked outside. Let's talk about that if we can get out alive. Wei Shilai was shocked. Miss Lu, what do you mean? Lin Zheng was also shocked. Lu Sanyang stood up. You'll understand once you take a look outside. Wei Shilai quickly walked out. As soon as he got out, he was shocked. After the rain, the girls who had become vengeful souls came to life again. They had chilling smiles on their faces. Their eyes were dark and terrifying as they ran towards their homes. The soldiers guarding outside were all shocked. They drew their swords, but the girls did not seem to see anyone. One by one, they came to life and ran home. Even those who were only a few months old crawled over. The soldiers looked at each other, and the leader immediately ran to report to Su Yenyu. Su Yenyu came out in a hurry. When he saw this strange scene, his hair stood on end. Has the fog dissipated? Can we get out? As long as he could get out, he didn't care if these people lived or died. Kongyu and Kongling's expressions also changed. The vengeful souls have revived. They will slaughter this village. No one in this village would survive. Those the vengeful souls hated would die first, but when the people they hated died, they would kill the others who were alive. After the first one who saw his dead daughter come to life again, he screamed. Then others started shouting as well. There were also all kinds of curses. They had already killed their daughters twice. Was there going to be a third time? Screams pierced through the sky. There were cries and the roars of men. It sounded as if they had taken something and smashed it on their bodies. The thick smell of blood spread all over. The screams slowly died down. Bean-sized raindrops started falling again and quickly gathered into a downpour. Chapter 85. New Hope, Part 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 85. New Hope, Part 1, Wei Shilai had already returned to the house and did not know what to do. This time, it rained for a long time. Lu Sanyang leaned on the table and closed her eyes. Wei Shilai had fallen asleep at some point. He was already very tired. Lin Zheng was sitting by the door and leaning against it. He had fallen asleep too. They were all woken up by the screams. Outside, the rain seemed to have stopped again, and the sound of cursing and beating could be heard again. Everyone knew what that sound was. No one went out to look again. Su Yenyu's men had already gone out to look for the exit to the village, but they couldn't find it. Everyone was flustered. Su Yenyu smashed everything in the house in a panic. The servants did not even dare to breathe loudly, and there was nothing they could do about it. After the cursing outside disappeared, it started to rain again. And it rained longer and longer. The fifth time the vengeful souls revived, someone cried. "Please, let us go. We're your parents after all. Leave, please." Facing their daughters who were becoming more and more terrifying, they were afraid. They could no longer hit them with the hoe. Seeing their originally cute daughter become so terrifying, they broke down crying and were gradually filled with fear. Su Yenyu went out to take a look and was so frightened that he immediately returned to his room. That strange smile on the girls' faces was a nightmare. Just looking at those expressions would make one wet their pants. Their eyes were pitch black, but when you looked at them, you could feel that they were looking at you. Su Yenyu only wanted to leave the place as soon as possible. Kongyu and Kongling drew many ghost-repelling talismans and pasted them all over the house. When Su Yenyu was accusing them of being useless, they couldn't retort. Although the villagers did not dare to kill their daughters anymore and cried for mercy and treated them respectfully, they still sneaked up to them and wrapped them in sacks. They sank them in the well or buried them underground with large rocks tied to them. But before long, the souls climbed out. Cries of despair could be heard everywhere. Wei Shilai sighed. Lu Sanyang couldn't stop frowning. She wanted to exorcise these poor children, but she couldn't. The resentment was too strong, and they were unwilling to be exorcised. They allowed Lu Sanyang to leave, but she was reluctant to go. This situation lasted for some days. Wei Shilai came over with some dry biscuits. "Have some." Lu Sanyang nibbled on the biscuit. She looked at the gray sky outside and sighed. At night, when she fell asleep, she had a terrible feeling. She was in a place surrounded by darkness. She wanted to break through the darkness, but her body was paralyzed. There were many intermittent voices in her ears. They sounded young and cold. "If you don't leave now, you'll never be able to leave." Lu Sanyang reached out, hoping to catch them. Perhaps sensing her thoughts, they dodged her. Lu Sanyang was very anxious. "I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving." She tried to chant the scriptures, but when she did, she could only hear painful voices. These vengeful souls were in pain and could not be exorcised. Lu Sanyang knew that it was because they did not get the justice they deserved. As long as they could seek justice, they could let go of their obsession. Otherwise, this resentment would only grow stronger and stronger. When Lu Sanyang thought of those unrepentant men, her expression darkened. All they needed to do was admit their fault and repent, but they refused to do so. Steady footsteps approached her, and the dark surroundings gradually became brighter. Lu Sanyang widened her eyes and saw Chu Yen walking towards her. With every step Chu Yen took, the darkness dissipated a little. He walked to Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang kept her head lowered and did not dare to look at him. Chu Yen whispered in her ear. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Lu Sanyang felt big hands around her waist. She could smell the man and feel his hot breath on her face. Chu Yen picked her up and walked out of the darkness. Lu Sanyang woke up from her dream and couldn't help but wonder why she dreamed of Chu Yen again. Even if Chu Yen could dispel the darkness, it was impossible for him to come into the village. Lu Sanyang went out. Wei Shilai was worried and quickly followed. Lin Zheng followed behind. As Lu Sanyang walked on the road, she saw all the houses were enveloped in black smoke. Actually, these vengeful souls are not scary. What they want is just a word of apology from their parents. Lu Sanyang spoke slowly. In the beginning, they only hoped that their parents would regret their actions and admit their faults. They wanted their parents to acknowledge their existence. However, because of being disappointed over and over, they became more terrifying. Wei Shilai sighed. Miss Lu, is there no other way? Lu Sanyang did not speak. After a while, she said, go and gather the entire village. Wei Shilai was stunned. Miss Lu, what are you going to do? Lu Sanyang looked at Wei Shilai. I'm not very sure, but there's no other way now. I can only give it a try. Lu Sanyang was not confident that she could make the villagers empathize with their daughters and feel their pain. With her current ability, she probably could not do it. What would happen if she could not do it? She could vaguely sense that she would suffer a backlash, but other than that, she could not think of any other way. If she chanted the scriptures, it would only make the souls feel even more painful and indignant. Originally, as long as they vented their anger, they would be willing to be exorcised by Lu Sanyang. However, the two masters that Su Yenyu brought with him attacked them for no reason, causing their resentment to increase multifold instead of decrease. Unless the villagers sincerely apologized and repented, there was nothing she could do. Lu Sanyang could make them experience the pain their daughter had experienced, but if she used too much strength, she might not be able to withstand it and suffer a backlash. However, there was no other way now. Wei Shilai had already gone to gather everyone. Su Yenyu was very unhappy. Why didn't she say she had a way earlier? When I get out, I'll definitely punish her. Kongyu and Kongling did not say anything. Although they did not have a good impression of Lu Sanyang, they definitely did not like Su Yenyu either. He was brainless and willful. Chapter 86. New Hope, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 86. New Hope, Part 2, after Wei Shilai gathered everyone in River Village, the sky was gloomy, as if it was also accumulating something. The men, women, and children were all extremely tense. They immediately knelt on the ground and begged. Quick, take them away. We know our mistake. On the surface, they apologized, but deep down, they still regretted giving birth to their daughters. Wei Shilai walked up to Lu Sanyang. Miss Lu, everyone is here. Lu Sanyang took a look. Those who are dead are not here yet. Wei Shilai frowned. Go back and bring your daughter over. When the villagers heard that, they fell silent. No one dared to move. They couldn't wait to stay away from those terrifying souls. Just looking at it made their hair stand on end. The villagers were terrified and knew very well that they only needed to kill the souls one more time before they would start fighting back. Wei Shilai roared. If you want to live, go quickly. This time, everyone woke up. The man pushed the woman out. It's all your fault for giving birth to her. Hurry up and bring her over. The women were terrified. Don't do this to me. I'm afraid. The women were unwilling to go and were immediately slapped a few times by the men. The women got up and went home in tears. Not long after, they returned with their daughters. As soon as they arrived, they immediately threw the girls on the ground. The girls who were thrown to the ground got up silently. They walked to their parents and sat down. They looked at their parents with their dark eyes and smiled, but their smiles only made their parents wet their pants. Wei Shilai sighed. All these villagers deserved to die, but he could do nothing to punish them. Instead, he had to help them out. He felt really bad, but there was nothing he could do. Su Yenyu felt a chill down his spine when he saw this scene. He asked Kongyu. What is she going to do? When can I go out? Kongyu could not understand what Lu Sanyang wanted to do. He shook his head. I don't know what she's going to do, but I hope it will work. If it did not work, they might never be able to leave this village. Su Yenyu pointed at Lu Sanyang. I don't care. Tell her that she must succeed, or I'll kill her entire family. Su Yenyu didn't know how serious the situation was. He just wanted to leave this place. Even if everyone here died, he could not die. Kong Yu said nothing. Kongling smiled mockingly. He thought to himself. If you want to kill her entire family, you have to be able to get out of here alive first. If you can't get out, everything you say is bullshit. Lu Sanyang sat cross-legged facing the villagers of River Village. She closed her eyes and slowly said, Now, hold your daughter's hand. Master, we don't dare, they sobbed, afraid of holding their daughter. Lu Sanyang did not answer them. She just closed her eyes and waited quietly. It was useless to sob and beg for mercy now. They dared to kill them, but now they didn't dare to hold their hands. After sobbing for a while, they closed their eyes and mustered up the courage to grab the little finger of the girl beside them. Lu Sanyang released her power and formed a huge circle. It was as if a bubble had wrapped around the entire village. Her body trembled slightly and blood surged into her throat. She swallowed the blood back down. Beads of sweat had already formed on her forehead. Lu Sanyang gritted her teeth and led everyone to experience despair. Everyone felt like they were enveloped by a warm force. Some people were immersed in this warm force, and their lips curled up into a smile. Only Kong Yu and Kongling looked at Lu Sanyang in disbelief. Gradually, the warmth gradually disappeared. They opened their eyes one after another, revealing expressions of confusion and curiosity about the world. They were like newborn babies who were extremely curious about everything around them and had expectations. They subconsciously wanted to lean against a warm place, wanted to return to their mother's arms, and wanted a kiss that was sweeter than honey from their parents. They would want to hear their mother's gentle comfort or hum a tune that they could not understand. But what greeted them was disgust. Oh.org, why is it a girl? How useless. She can't even give birth to a boy. Disgust and disdain made them feel aggrieved and suffocated. The smiles on their faces were replaced by grievance and pain. They could feel their bodies going hot and cold, or the pain of someone pinching their flesh. Someone opened his mouth as if he wanted to shout, but he couldn't make a sound. Someone cried and shook his head in silent pain. The first to wake up were Su Yenyu and the others who had nothing to do with River Village. Su Yenyu's face was ashen, and his servants did not dare to speak. No one expected that they would be able to experience such pain and despair. They were awake, but everyone in River Village was still immersed in it. Blood seeped out of the corner of Lu Sanyang's mouth. Her face was pale, and her strength had weakened. She had suffered a great backlash, and the thick smell of blood surged in her throat. However, she swallowed it back down again. Lu Sanyang felt extreme pain, as if her internal organs were being crushed. She opened her eyes. She was still not strong enough. If she could increase her strength by a level or two, she would be able to make these people feel more of the despair and pain. However, she could not do it yet. Her strength had already been drained. She swallowed the blood in her throat and looked at the people who had opened their eyes with a puzzled expression. Lu Sanyang knew that they hadn't fully experienced the pain, so when they came back to their senses, they would only be angry. The sound of footsteps came from behind Lu Sanyang. She felt someone sitting behind her. A large hand was placed on her shoulder and a powerful force was transmitted to her body and gradually healed the injuries that she suffered from the backlash. The man's calm voice entered her ears. Continue. Lu Sanyang immediately closed her eyes and released her power again. This time, the power seemed to be endless. It was powerful and thick. In an instant, everyone was taken to another dimension. Chapter 87. The Fruit of Evil. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 87. The fruit of evil compared to the burden just now, Lu Sanyang felt extremely relaxed this time. Under her guidance, the villagers went back to another space. They did not know what they had done wrong, nor did they know why they were not liked. They were all very sad and tried to please all the adults who frightened them. However, in return, they were still beaten. The adults always cursed them in disgust, telling them to die. They still did not understand what death was, but they did not want to die. They wanted to live. Even if their parents didn't love them, they still tried their best to survive. However, the punches their father threw at them were painful. The pinches from their grandmother were hurtful too. They wanted their mother to hug them, but their mother hit them as well. It hurt. It hurt too much. Everyone looked pained. Someone even shouted, "Father, stop hitting me. I'm in so much pain. Mother, don't hit me. Don't abandon me." They were sick. Their throat felt like it was on fire, but it was also very cold. They were thirsty and wanted to drink water. Why was the kettle so far away? They really hoped that their parents could give them a bowl of water to drink. Finally, the pain was gone. They were so happy to be hugged by their father. It was so cold in the water. They shouted, "Father, don't go. Don't leave me in the water. I'm frozen. Don't go." They were dead. But they really wanted to live. They were thrown into the river and slowly sank to the bottom. They were eaten by fish and prawns, but their resentment never dissipated. Many people sitting together looked like they were in pain and despair. Their mouths were wide open, as if they could not breathe. They clutched their necks tightly, as if they were trying to push something away. These were what their daughter had experienced before she died. She was sad, afraid, desperate, and in pain. After dying once, everyone slowly regained their composure, as if they had just survived a calamity. After a long while, Su Yenyu couldn't help but ask, "Why is it so quiet? Is it over?" Kongyu said with a frown, "It's not over yet. The real fruit of evil has only been formed now." Su Yenyu looked at Chu Yan's back and narrowed his eyes. "Who is this man? Is he also a psychic?" Kongyu looked at Chu Yan with a puzzled expression. "I don't know. There are no spiritual energy fluctuations coming out of his body." Su Yenyu looked at Kongyu in disdain, thinking to himself that he must hire new masters when he went out. Taoist priests from the cloud-breaking sect were just a joke. They bragged so much but couldn't handle even the smallest things. Kongyu couldn't be bothered to explain it to Su Yenyu. He was deep in thought, wondering who Chu Yan and Lu Sanyang were. He must find out if they were foes or friends of the Xian sect. It would be good if they were good people. But if they were evil people, they had to be eliminated as soon as possible. After almost 2 hours of tranquility, the people of River Village began to look happy. A warm force brought them out of the cold water. They could go and seek justice for themselves. They controlled their father's body and made him behave like an animal to vent their anger. They had no intention of harming anyone. They were doing this not because they wanted them to be afraid, but because they wanted them to regret and admit their mistakes. But they didn't. They just wanted their parents to repent. However, their parents did not admit their mistake and even went to invite a Taoist priest. They felt terrible, painful, and hateful. Being injured by a real master was very painful. Why didn't they repent? Why did they have to treat them like this? They were the ones in the wrong. After being beaten to death for the second time, everyone's expressions turned to anger. However, they were still struggling. The fists that their parents threw at them destroyed their hearts time and time again. Revenge, kill them. They will never admit their mistake, they thought to themselves. They were revived again and again, and their resentment was getting stronger, but they still couldn't bear to do it. Those were their parents. Why did their parents treat them like this? They were consumed by overwhelming hatred. After experiencing such pain, everyone woke up and cried. Now they understood how painful their daughter felt to be abandoned. They regretted it, hugging the children in front of them and crying and confessed. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Sonia, it's my fault. Kill me. I deserve to die. I'm not worthy of being a human. Daniel, kill me. Kill me. I know you can do it. I'm a beast. Kill me. When they came to their senses, they were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Without suffering what others have suffered, do not persuade others to be kind. Only those who experienced pain would know what pain felt like. They were demons. They had killed their daughter time and time again and were still unrepentant. Now that they went through what their daughters had gone through, they realized how painful it was. They deserved to die. They deserved to die. Lu Sanyang slowly exhaled and started chanting, Namo Amitabha Buddha. Note. Amitabha Pure Land Rebirth Mantra. This time, she saw the resentment dissipate bit by bit. When the resentment dissipated a little, the girls' expressions would change, and their dark eyes would gradually return to normal. They looked at their parents and realized how warm it was to be hugged by them. They were reluctant to leave, but they knew that it was time. Lu Sanyang chanted the rebirth mantra repeatedly. A ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds and shone on her, dispelling all the haze. She was bathed in Buddhist light as she chanted the scripture. Soon, more sunlight shone on everyone. In the sunlight, the vengeful girls, who had terrified everyone, disappeared one by one. Don't go, daughter. Father and mother are wrong. Don't go. Tears of regret and self-blame were shed. Lu Sanyang said word by word, do you confess? All the men in the village knelt down. I confess. I'm guilty. The women sobbed and pounded their hearts. Some even fainted from crying. The fog had dissipated. Wei Shilai wiped the corners of his eyes and said to Su Yenyu, Lord Su, we can start arresting them. Su Yenyu glanced at Lu Sanyang and ordered. Arrest all these heinous people and interrogate them carefully. After giving the order, Su Yenyu strode out of the village. The fog had already dissipated. Chapter 88. Admit my mistake. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 88. Admit my mistake. Some people came in from outside. The leader was wearing armor and knelt down in front of Su Yenyu. After saying something, Su Yenyu waved his hand impatiently and followed the person out. Kongyu and Kongling, who were following Su Yenyu, also walked up to the people and said something. They looked in the direction of River Village and followed Su Yenyu. Officer Zhou ran into the village with the people from the government office. When he arrived in front of Wei Shilai, he said excitedly, Sir, are you hurt? I thought. Officer Zhou's eyes turned red. It had been 10 days since Magistrate Wei went into the village. The local officials were all here, but they could not enter the fog. Some masters came and set up many formations outside, but it didn't work. However, no one expected a beam of light to break through the fog and rise into the sky. Then, they saw the sun rise and the fog gradually dispersed. Wei Shilai looked at Lu Sanyang and bowed. This is all thanks to Miss Lu. If not for Miss Lu, we probably wouldn't have been able to come out. Lu Sanyang had led the villagers to experience what it felt like to be abandoned. Even if those vengeful souls could not bring themselves to kill, they would do it one day when their resentment accumulated to a point. Wei Shilai looked at Chu Yen and said respectfully, Who is this young man? Chu Yen said calmly, Chu Yen. Wei Shilai was a little excited. Chu Yen, do you want to be a constable? Chu Yen said coldly, I'm not interested. Wei Shilai felt it was a pity. He remembered that when the mortuary was on fire the last time, a woman reported that a suspect named Chu Yen was likely to be the arsonist. However, when he saw Chu Yen now, he knew that Chu Yan was definitely not that kind of person. He really wanted to recruit him as a constable, but Chu Yan was unwilling. Wei Shilai sighed deeply. Wei Shilai said to Lu Sanyang, "Miss Lu, I didn't expect us to be trapped for 10 days. Your parents must be worried sick. I'll get someone to send you back." Lu Sanyang nodded. She just wanted to go home and stay away from Chu Yan. Even though Chu Yan had given her strength to help her, Lu Sanyang still did not want to interact with him. However, even if Lu Sanyang walked quickly, she still couldn't shake Chu Yan off. Once Lu Sanyang got into the carriage, she immediately instructed. "Let's go." The constable driving the carriage agreed. "Miss Lu, sit tight. I'll send you home now." Lu Sanyang heaved a sigh of relief when the carriage started moving. Before Lu Sanyang returned home, she met Lu Dalong and Lu Erlang on the city gate. The constable jumped off the carriage and said, "Mr. Lu, you don't have to go to River Village. Miss Lu is here." Lu Sanyang got out of the carriage. "Eldest brother, second brother, why are you here?" Lu Erlang sniffled. "Sanyang, you're finally back. You scared us to death." Lu Sanyang had been gone for 10 days and was trapped in that place. They were extremely anxious. Madame Wei had cried several times and blamed herself for not stopping Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang had always been very obedient. If Madame Wei insisted, Lu Sanyang would have definitely chosen to stay. Lu Sanyang felt a lump in her throat. "I'm sorry for making you worry." Lu Dalong walked towards Chu Yan. "Thank you." Lu Sanyang turned around and realized that Chu Yan had been following behind her along the way. She did not know what to say. Lu Erlang also smiled at Chu Yan. "Let's go home and eat." Lu Sanyang was puzzled. In the few days that she was gone, when did Chu Yan and her eldest and second brother become so close? Lu Sanyang looked at Lu Erlang, who immediately took 2 steps back. "Sanyang, don't read my mind." She was speechless. Lu Dalong chuckled but said nothing. Since Lu Sanyang's eldest brother and second brother were here to pick her up, there was naturally no need for a carriage. The constable driving the carriage bid goodbye and left. Everyone had their privacy. Lu Sanyang would not use her power arbitrarily to peep at their privacy. She was just curious about what happened in the past few days that made Chu Yan so close to her 2 brothers. When they returned home, Madame Wei was the happiest. Madame Wei's eyes turned red. "It's good that you're back. I'll go and prepare a few more dishes. You've lost weight." Madame Wei was about to leave when she said to Chu Yan, "Stay for dinner." Lu Sanyang silently returned to her house. She was really speechless. At noon, Madame Wei cooked a table full of dishes. Mr. Lu poured a full glass of wine and stood up to say to Chu Yan, "Thank you for saving my daughter. With you as her husband, I'll be relieved. Cheers." With that, he gulped down the glass of wine. Lu Sanyang almost bit her tongue and looked at Mr. Lu in shock. What did her father say? Why did Chu Yan become her husband? Chu Yan stood up and drank the wine in one gulp. Madame Wei smiled and filled his cup again. Lu Dalong stood up. "Remember to be good to Sanyang." She was speechless. After Lu Dalong toasted, Lu Erlang stood up. "If you dare to treat Sanyang badly, my brother and I will not let you off." Lu Sanyang was anxious. "Mother," Madame Wei stopped smiling and looked at Lu Sanyang solemnly. "Sanyang, this time, Chu Yan risked his life to save you. Mother wants to betroth you to Chu Yan. Do you have objections?" Chu Yan looked at Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang looked up and met Chu Yan's deep eyes. She opened her mouth and said, "Mother, didn't we agree?" Madame Wei had already made up her mind. "If you don't want to, give me a reason." Is Chu Yan not good looking or something? Lu Sanyang looked at Chu Yan. With a faint smile, Chu Yan said gently, Sanyang, I want to marry you and protect you for the rest of your life. I will never force you to do anything you don't want to do. I will treat you as a queen for the rest of my life. Lu Sanyang wished she could find a hole to bury herself in. Chu Yan was crazy. He was crazy. How could he say such things in front of her parents? Lu Sanyang wanted to escape the scene. Madam Wei said firmly, since you can't say why you don't like him, father and mother will decide your marriage for you. Lu Dalong also chimed in. Sanyang, father and mother won't do anything that's bad for you. Lu Sanyang knew that, but she didn't want to marry Chu Yan. She was afraid of him but didn't know exactly what was it about him that made her so afraid. Chapter 89. Choosing Him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 89. Choosing him. She was not afraid of the vengeful souls, but she was afraid of Chu Yan. At first, Lu Sanyang thought that she was afraid because Chu Yan would be a very powerful general in the future. But then she realized it wasn't. Lu Sanyang took a deep breath and looked at Chu Yan. He was smiling and looked gentle. She mustered her courage and asked. Will you hurt me? Chu Yan chuckled. I won't. For the rest of his life, he would never hurt her again. Lu Sanyang looked at Chu Yan, as if she wanted to confirm if he was sincere. Lu Sanyang wanted to see if he was lying from his facial expression. Chu Yan's expression was firm. Every word he said was serious. Madam Wei cleared her throat. Chu Yan, you have to keep your word. In the future, protect Sanyang and love her forever. Chu Yan replied sincerely. I will. Madam Wei said to her daughter, Sanyang, if you have no objections, I'll make the decision. In Madam Wei's opinion, Chu Yan was already the best candidate to be her son-in-law. At that time, in such a dangerous situation, he even risked his life to enter the village to save her daughter. Chu Yan really liked Lu Sanyang. As parents, Mr. Lu and Madam Wei were on the same page and did not want their daughter to miss out on such a good husband. Lu Sanyang blushed. Mom, you can make the decision. Lu Sanyang returned to her room with a red face. Suddenly, she was looking forward to this marriage, but she was also inexplicably afraid. Lu Sanyang took out the embroidery, hoping to calm herself down. She had already made one for Lu Juer. Now, she was going to make one for her eldest brother. Mr. Lu kept chatting happily in the dining room. Because today was special, Madam Wei did not stop him from drinking. Mr. Lu consumed quite a bit and was drunk. Lu Dalong and Lu Erlang's faces were red from drinking as well, but Chu Yan was still sober. After saying goodbye, he went back. In the afternoon, because they were drunk, Mr. Lu, Lu Dalong, and Lu Erlang did not go out. Madam Wei knocked on the door and entered Lu Sanyang's room. She sat beside her daughter and did not speak. Her gaze landed on Lu Sanyang's embroidery and she reached out to gently stroke her hair. Sanyang, do you really hate Chu Yan that much? Madam Wei sighed, feeling complicated. Lu Sanyang shook her head. No, I'm just a little afraid. Madam Wei smiled and was relieved. I've been worried sick these past few days. It was Chu Yan who came to our house and said that he could save you, but he wanted us to agree to him marrying you. Father and mother didn't want to agree, but we were worried about you. He said that he would protect you for the rest of your life. He would go wherever you went. He wouldn't let you walk the dangerous path alone. Madam Wei's eyes turned red. No one could move their hearts more than Chu Yan. Madam Wei doted on her daughter, and so did Mr. Lu. They did not ask for money. Their only request was that Lu Sanyang could be well and have someone whom she could rely on and fall back to in times of trouble. Lu Sanyang did not speak. Madam Wei said softly, Tell me, did he save you this time? Lu Sanyang nodded. It was Chu Yen who lent her strength at the most critical moment. Madame Wei smiled. Then, I'm relieved. Madame Wei looked at Lu Sanyang. Lu Sanyang was afraid of Chu Yen probably because Chu Yen was too tall. When he did not smile, he looked a little intimidating. However, there were not many good men like him. If Lu Sanyang was unwilling to marry him, she would force her into the bridal sedan chair. Lu Sanyang couldn't help but hear her mother's thoughts. She was speechless. Since she couldn't avoid it, she would give it a try. At least Chu Yen was different from the others. It would be better if he could be gentler with her. After all, she liked gentle men. Madame Wei left in relief. Lu Sanyang picked up the needle and thread and started embroidering. When Chu Yen returned home, he was stopped by Madame Li. You're back. Come and sit down. We can start eating. Madame Li smiled and asked Chu Yen how he had been doing. She didn't mind Chu Yen giving her a cold face. Chu Yen glanced at Madame Li and saw a few unfamiliar faces coming out of the house. Matchmaker Zhao smiled. Chu Yen, you're back. Come and take a look. This is Jiang Xiaohua. She is a very hard-working girl. Matchmaker Zhao pulled a thin woman out from behind her. The woman's skin was dark and she was carefully sizing up Chu Yen. When she saw Chu Yan's gaze, she was shocked and immediately hid behind Matchmaker Zhao. She pulled the matchmaker's sleeve and begged. Madame Li smiled. Chu Yen, you're not young anymore. I'll make the decision on your marriage for you. Chu Yan's eyes were cold. I don't need you to interfere in my matters. Madame Li was a little frightened by his cold gaze, but she still forced a smile. Why are you so stubborn? If you can't find a wife, people might think I'm not doing a good job as a mother. I'm doing this for your own good. Chu Yen looked at Madame Li. Have you been to Jiangping Temple? Madame Li's pupils constricted and her body trembled slightly. She immediately panicked and stuttered. Chu, Madame Li wanted to ask Chu Yen as to how he knew, but when she saw Chu Yen leave without looking back, she could not say a word. She seemed to have lost her soul. How did Chu Yen know? Even Mr. Chu didn't know about it. When Chu Yen mentioned Jiangping Temple, she was instantly scared to death. Madame Li, what's wrong? Are you all right? Matchmaker Zhao walked to Madame Li's side and looked at her with interest. Chu Yen had only mentioned the name of a small temple. Was there any need to be so scared? Madame Li's face was a little pale. She tried her best to maintain her composure. I'm sorry, it seems like my stepson doesn't want me to interfere in his matters. Let's forget about it. Matchmaker Zhao looked at Jiang Xiaohua, who also seemed to be afraid, and thought for a moment. Alright, forget it. In any case, even if Chu Yen agreed, Jiang Xiaohua probably wouldn't want to marry such a terrifying man. What was more, at a glance, one could tell the two of them weren't compatible. Matchmaker Zhao cleared her throat. Sisterly, though it didn't work, I spent a lot of time on it. Chapter 90. True Buddha. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 90. True Buddha. Madame Li's mind was in a mess. She just wanted Matchmaker Zhao to go away as soon as possible. She gave 200 copper coins to Matchmaker Zhao and asked her to leave. After Matchmaker Zhao left with Jiang Xiaohua, Madame Li was not even in the mood to clean up the table. She packed up and immediately left. Along the way, she kept looking back, afraid that she would be followed. When she arrived at Jiangping Temple, she took out 100 coins and donated them. The old monk in the temple chanted Amitabha. Madame Li did not say anything. After offering incense, she left silently. After she left, Madame Li was certain that Chu Yen knew something. She did not know how much he knew, but she was already afraid. Chu Yen was simply a devil. How could she dare to provoke him? After Madame Li left, the old monk sighed. A young monk came in from outside. The old monk said calmly, "Chu-chun, have you finished your homework today?" The young monk, no more than 10 years old, nodded. "I finished everything." The old monk smiled. "Then let's go to the temple hall and chant." The young monk bowed to the old monk and entered the temple hall. He knelt and began to chant the scriptures. Madame Li felt uneasy all the way home. However, Chu Yen only warned her once and did not say anything else. Madame Li had been on tenterhooks for 2 days. Seeing that Chu Yen did not do anything, she comforted herself that Chu Yen might not know anything. She was just scaring herself. Thinking of this, Madame Li felt relieved. The River Village case shocked the entire Yong County. The people who were arrested were all convicted, and Wei Shilai was very busy. Not only did he have to report the case, but he also had to interrogate the criminals. Fortunately, they had already admitted their mistake and were cooperative with the interrogation. When the news of them being trapped for 10 days was reported to the capital, Marquis Su couldn't sit still anymore. He went around looking for masters, but no one could help. Fortunately, Su Yenyu came out safely. On the same day Su Yenyu came out, he went back to the capital. Lu Sanyang stayed at home for a few days and embroidered the pillowcase. On the night she returned from River Village, she dreamed of it. In her dream, she saw many golden lights flying into her body. After waking up, she clearly felt that she had become stronger. It was as if a new world had opened up for her. She was like a child who was learning to speak and walk. Madame Wei, Mr. Liu, and the others began to accept that she had taken the path of a psychic. But they still loved her with all their hearts. But what kind of a path it was, they didn't know. She could only walk this path herself. In the future, she would even have to leave home and go far away just to figure out what it meant to be a psychic. For some reason, Lu Sanyang thought of Chu Yen. She was a little confused. Was Chu Yen also a psychic just like her? On the 28th of June. During this period of time, Lu Sanyang lived very peacefully. She embroidered at home when she had nothing to do and helped Madame Wei cook at night. At night, she was a little sleepy, so she washed up early and went to bed. In a daze, she heard someone calling her. Lu Sanyang opened her eyes and saw a woman beside her. Lu Sanyang remembered that she was Hong Ying, also known as Zhou Mingzhu. The woman smiled at her. "Go for a walk with me." When Lu Sanyang saw her, she knew that Zhou Mingzhu was already dead. Zhou Mingzhu was a criminal and had long been sent to the capital to be punished. However, when Lu Sanyang saw her now, she could only see her soul. Lu Sanyang asked, "Did you visit your father?" Zhou Mingzhu smiled. "He can't see me. If I go, he won't know either. He's been looking for me for more than 10 years. If he finds out that I'm dead, he'll definitely be very sad." Zhou Mingzhu walked forward. She placed her hands behind her back and danced briskly. "Is it true that when people like me die, we'll go to hell?" Lu Sanyang followed behind Zhou Mingzhu. "Are you afraid?" Zhou Mingzhu did not speak. She paused for a moment before saying, "Lu Sanyang, are you afraid?" Lu Sanyang did not understand why she said that. Zhou Mingzhu smiled. "When I was Hong Ying, though I did a lot of wrong things, I could tell that there were people 10 times or 100 times more evil than me. You, Magistrate Wei, and the constables are going to fight with these evil people. Are you afraid?" Lu Sanyang understood what she meant. Lu Sanyang did not answer her. Instead, she walked with her for a long time. The empty street was very quiet. Zhou Mingzhu stopped by the house she grew up in. She looked at the small courtyard and said, "I don't remember them, but they should still remember me. She grew up here." Even though she had been away for many years and had forgotten everything, the flowers and trees here wouldn't forget her. She would always be remembered as a girl who once lived here. Lu Sanyang nodded. Let's go in and take a look. Zhou Mingzhu fell silent. After a long time, a gust of wind blew over and Zhou Mingzhu disappeared with it. Lu Sanyang looked at the slightly desolate courtyard and closed her eyes to chant softly. Every word of the scripture carried a powerful force. This force would cleanse Zhou Mingzhu of her sins and allow her to be reborn. Lu Sanyang gently raised her hand and looked at the golden dot condensed between her fingers. With a flick of her finger, the golden dot flew to the courtyard. This was her gift to Zhou Mingzhu and Officer Zhou. She had become stronger. This was the first time she had used her power like this. She was still too weak. She was so weak that she could only use 1,000th of her strength. She had the heart of a Buddha and could see through her past life and sense the 8 senses of the world. As soon as she woke up, she had already become a Buddha. She was the true Buddha. Humans had 8 senses. The 6th sense was the ability to sense danger and unknown things ahead of time. Those who entered the Xian sect had a 6th sense that was more acute than ordinary people. The 7th sense was consciousness, and the 8th sense was the death sense. When one awakened the 8 senses, they would be the true Buddha. Everything in the world was for their use. When Lu Sanyang understood what her power was, she did not know if she was lucky or unlucky. To cultivators, this person was called the Chosen One. Becoming a god was a piece of cake for her. When the golden light entered the small courtyard, Lu Sanyang could feel happiness. There seemed to be a warm and sweet smell in the air. Lu Sanyang knew that it was love from parents. Being loved and protected was sweet. Lu Sanyang also smiled. Officer Zhou had a dream. He pushed open the door and saw his wife and daughter sitting in the room. There was a fragrant meal on the table. His wife reached out to stroke her daughter's hair and smiled gently at him. Thank you for keeping your promise and never giving up on our daughter. Officer Zhou's face was covered in tears. This was his wife and daughter. His wife had passed away many years ago. His daughter was a felon. How could he have seen them? Officer Zhou already had an answer in his heart. He cried.